Thank you. It's great to be here, and often when I talk about HR, sometimes people's eyes start to sort of glaze over, and I might zone out. But you will not be zoning out in this session, because I'm going to keep it moving along, and I'm going to make sure that there's something for everybody. I understand that we've got people here who are sole traders and don't have any staff members or team members, and we've got people who do manage staff. So there is something here for everybody. So I'm not going to spend very much time talking about me, because Tracy just did a pretty good job in introducing what I do. 9 to 3 is a recruitment and HR company. It's been going for 12 years now. So I've had a long time in that space. In the previous business I had for 18 years before I sold that. I belong to lots of professional bodies. I've got lots of business experience, so hopefully I have a lot of information and experience that I can pass on to you. I'm a believer in lifelong learning, so I've just gone back to do my Masters at Sydney Uni, and I was just saying to Maria Nicola that she said, how long will it take? And I said, probably the rest of my life. But anyway, it's always good to push the outer edge of the envelope and do something different. 9 to 3 is a recruitment company, helps people from tiny little businesses who call us up and say, I need a bookkeeper for 3 hours every Thursday. I need somebody to help me out, twice a week or every second week or something like that, through to large businesses that we recruit for full-time employees and that sort of thing. On the HR side, we do consulting. So we help people with a range of different issues through their HR. What I'm going to talk to you about today, I decided that we do CRM, not customer relationship management, but more excitingly, compliance, recruitment and management. And how I thought that I'd do that roughly, and we are running a bit late, but basically I'll speak to you for about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll have a little break and you speak to me. So you tell me what your experiences have been in that area. Have you got experiences? Has something worked? Has something not worked? And that way, that cements your learning much more. You understand more if we apply then what I'm talking about to sort of real life situations. So I encourage you to, this is your session, so make sure that you, that you do involve yourself in it and have a chat to me and ask questions. Anytime while I'm talking, happy for you to ask questions, no problems at all. So we're going to start with compliance, and by compliance I mean compliance with your team member. That's my team. Some of them in February this year we ran a morning tea, and they're carrying stuff in. Now you work really hard to develop your business. It's an asset, it's something that you own. And I often say, look, you can't build your business without people. Why? Because there's only 24 hours in the day, there's only 7 days in the week, and there's only one of you. So there's only so far that you individually can ever take your business. If you want your business to develop so that you can make more money, have a better lifestyle, pursue your dreams, you need people. But there's one problem with people. When you take a person into your business, you're adding risk because you don't actually know what you're getting. I often say, look, I can bring all my years of recruitment to the fore. We can test people in numerous ways, but I can't tell you what's in someone's heart, and I can't tell you what's in their brain. And my product is totally unreliable. I'm the only person here that'll sell you a totally unreliable product. But that's what makes it so interesting. So as a business owner, it's up to us to be really smart about the way we use people so that we can protect our asset and protect our business. So I didn't open a graphic design business, and the reason is that that's my diagram. So you can see why I decided never to go into graphic design. But I find that that's a simple way of just explaining to you how to employ if you haven't employed before. So basically, if you look at it like an umbrella, at the top you have an industrial instrument. That's something made by the government, and everybody in Australia has to employ under those rules. There are 3 types. There is the National Employment Standards, which are 10 minimum standards that everybody has to employ under, with the exception of some public servants. So every single person in Australia falls under the National Employment Standards. Then there is an award. Now there are 2 types of awards. There are what's called industry awards and occupation awards. An industry award is like the banking award. An occupation award is like the clerk's award. So a lot of people fall under an award, but not everybody falls under an award. So everybody falls under the NES. Some people will fall under the NES and an award as well. And then there's what's called an EBA, which is an enterprise bargaining agreement. And that's where a business goes to the government and says, I want to create an award just for my business or just for my industry. And so some businesses have an EBA that they employ under, and that is the industrial instrument that sits at the top like the umbrella. Then hanging off that, the handle is your employment contract. You must have an employment contract. While the NES or the award might say, well, in Australia, these are the maximum and minimum hours, this is what you have to be paid on a Saturday, all those sorts of things, the employment contract says, yeah, but when you work here at 9 to 3, this is what we want. This is in our specific workplace. And as long as we're compliant with what's above us, we can put what we want into that contract. But you must have that contract. Now, I often say, look, there's a lot of things you can R&D off the internet. By R&D, I mean rip off and duplicate. But your employment contract is not one of them. You need to have it written up by a solicitor or to use a HR company that uses legal documents like we do, because it's the one avenue that your workers have the most scope to get the most money out of you. So think about it like that. Be very careful. Don't go to the internet or get one off a friend and copy it. Doesn't work. And then off your employment contract hangs your person. So does that make sense? In a simplistic and quick way, that's how you employ in Australia. So with the National Employment Standards, what are they? They're just 10 minimum standards that apply to every person. And they cover different things like the number of hours of work in a week. There's 38 hours in a week. That means if you do 39, they're doing 1 hour's overtime. You have to be aware of these things. Requests for flexible working arrangements. Certain groups of people can come to you and request more flexibility at work. Parental leave, annual leave. Personal carers leave used to be called sick leave, used to be 8 days, now it's 10 days. All of these things are rights of every worker in Australia, and we all have to abide by those things there. Also, when you employ somebody, you have to give them, there we go, Fair Work Information Statement. It's a government statement, and by law, you have to give it to them, and you also have to record how you give it to them, or that they have to sign that they've got it. So if you're employing people and you're not giving them that, you're already breaking the law there. And why we have to give them that is because it's to inform people of their rights. So with awards, I hear lots of people say, oh, we pay above the award rate. That award rate's really low, so we don't have to worry about awards. And I'm like, wrong, 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 wrong. Everybody has to worry about awards, because what happens is that base rate that you may pay well above, but that base rate is what's used to calculate overtime, penalty rates. Maybe you got your people working 42 hours a week instead of 38. Maybe you haven't thought about overtime. Maybe they do some work on Sundays. Once you start hitting double time and things like that on those minimums, you might find that that fee that you thought you're so way above, you're not actually way above. You're not meeting the minimum, and then you're in a position of risk. Awards also talk about lots of other things to do with employment, not only penalties and overtime, but did you know certain awards have a clause called a casual conversion clause? And what that means is that when you take on a casual, after a period of time, they have a right to become permanent. So think about it. That can really affect your business. So if your award has that in there, you need to know so that you can make strong business decisions and work out how to manage it. I always say people are always scared by HR, and I say, well, look, the thing is, you need to know before your staff knows about these things. And once you know it, once you've got your head around it, you're right for moving forward. But it's a sad thing that some employees show their most amount of proactivity and their best research skills when they're researching their own entitlements and going to take you to court. So, you'll be like, wow, I wish she worked that well for me. Look what she's come up with. So there's lots of things in awards, things like annualised salaries, the ability to do that, things like ordinary hours of work. They even tell you how to manage dispute resolution. So if there's a problem and, you do go to court and you say, well, we followed the award, it said da-da-da-da, and we did that, puts you in a much stronger position. Now, lots of people say, I don't want to do all of that. I don't want to pay PAYG and super and all of those hassles. Now I just use contractors and it's all good now. Susie down the street, she works for me, a couple of hours a week. She just gives me an invoice and I pay that and I don't have to worry about anything. Well, is that right or is that wrong? Well, it's grey, and that's the problem. And you're running a lot of risks when you do that. The reason is, you think about what an employee is generally. An employee is someone who's fully directed by you, right? They turn up to work, you pay them the hours that they work. They're not responsible for the materials or the equipment. You know, you give them a computer, they use your phone. They perform duties. You say, I want you to do this, this and this. They generally work set hours. It's usually personal services. They're recognised as part of the business. You know, when one of my staff go out to somewhere, they go out as a representative of 9 to 3. I'm an employee as well. I represent 9 to 3. They can't take any commercial risk and they can't make a profit and loss. You know, if I say to my marketing assistant, oh, look, you know, I want to do these posts, you know, through our social media channels, he can't say to me, oh, well, Kathryn, you know, I think that for that I'm going to charge you $100. And he's thinking, well, it's going to take me so long. It's about $60. I'll make $40 on that deal. He can't do that. He's an employee. He can't make profit or loss from it. And by the same way, he doesn't bear any risk. If something goes wrong, he doesn't bear the risk. The company bears the risk. I bear the risk. So that's what an employee is, okay? That's the relationship of an employee. But a contractor, on the other side, a contractor bears the risk. So, you know, if you get somebody in to put a window in your house and it leaks, you go back to that person. They bear the risk for any unsatisfactory work. They can have control over the work. So if I say to a graphic designer, you know, my picture of the umbrella and the person offered is pretty bad, so, you know, can you design me? But I need this in it. I don't know if that person's going to do it at midnight on a Sunday night. I don't know what colours they're going to use. I just give them a project and they say to me, that will cost you this much money, and I pay that. So I pay for the completion of the project. They generally use their own tools and material. They generally have a business. Okay, so they work for other people as well, and they can employ or contract out further. So if I ask someone to design that picture, I don't actually know if they're using their little junior designer to do that. I'm just having a relationship with that business. So where the difficulty comes in is, what is that relationship really like? Now, if it's your friend who is helping you out a couple of hours a week, doesn't work for anyone else, is totally directed by you, they're going to be an employee. So imagine they work for you for 6 years and then they decide to move on. And then someone says to them, oh, 6 years, you would have got a prorated long service leave payout. And they said, no, I didn't get anything like that. Well, but didn't you get your holidays and everything? No. But hang on, didn't you work for Kathryn every Wednesday from 10 till 4? Yes. You know, didn't you go to her house? Yes. Did she tell you what to do? Yes. I think if you make a phone call, you're probably going to be an employee and you're probably able to receive all of those things. And they're absolutely right. Person makes the call, you get fined, ATO will fine you for sham contracting, Fair Work will fine you $51,000 for one breach, okay? And you have to back pay, wages, super, all of those things. So unfortunately, people tend to think, I don't want to do all that employment stuff, I'll just use contractors. But the risk is much greater. If you're using a contractor and it's a proprietary limited company like us, you ring us up and say, I need a graphic designer to help me out. You know, I've got a project. We supply that person to you. We employ that person. We don't contract people. We employ them, but we're a proprietary limited company. We're a contractor to you. So that's how it works. So you just need to be very sure of that relationship. People use contractors because they don't know the law, they think they're protected, they think it's the easy way out, and they think it's going to save them money and work. But when that relationship breaks down, or when somebody gets into that person's ear and says, do you know what, maybe you're not a contractor, and they make the call, they may not be a contractor, and that's when you get into trouble. The ATO have a great tool on their site called the Contractors Tool, and you can go in there and it'll ask you questions and you put in yes or no, and at the bottom it'll say this person is an employee, this person is a contractor. And then what about super? Well, here's the thing. If you're using a contractor and they're not a proprietary limited company, and 50% or more of their invoices for personal services, like working on a computer, digging a hole, painting a picture, and they're an individual, you have to pay them super. That's the law. So you're not saving that anyway. So a lot of people get caught out with super, and I would, if you're using contractors, always check with your accountant about the superannuation issue, because that is a big one. And then lots of people say, oh, but Susie's got an ABN. And I say, well, fantastic. Susie might have a big colourful fan as well. Means about as much. Like, it means nothing. An ABN does not mean that you have a business, okay? It's actually taken on the relationship, and then if it goes to court and they're looking at it, they will look at the person and say, does that person really have a business? Are they really a contractor, or are they an individual? So whether you're using contractors or employees, what you need to do is make sure that you have an induction system for them. And the best way to do that is to have a checklist. So, and that can be the soft things like taking them through the office, you know where the kitchen is and the bathroom and that sort of thing, but also your policies. Actually talking to them about the policies, saying, here's our work health and safety policy, here's our code of conduct, and here's your checklist. I'm going to leave you for a little while. Have a read of these, and when you've read them, sign. Here's your Fair Work information statement I have to give you. Just sign there that I've given it to you. That is the single most important thing that you can do to make sure that you get sign-off from people that work for you, contractors as well, and that you cross-reference it to policies. When you go to Fair Work, more and more, the commissioners are finding in favour of businesses who have written policies and do these sorts of things. So it's not just for big business, it's for everybody. And in terms of policies, people usually like, isn't that something that, like the public service, have on a dusty shelf somewhere? Like, we don't need to do that. Well, yes, you do. Everyone should have a work health and safety policy. And that is because when your employee loses their temper and picks up the phone and hurls it across the room, and it hits the wall and it rebounds and it hits them in the head, and they have massive, medical bills and they're going to take you to court, you can say, well, actually, Rusty, it says here in our work health and safety policy, do not throw objects, which it actually says in ours. Do not throw objects. And look, here's your induction checklist where you read that policy. That's how it works to protect you. The 3 general policies for everybody, even tiny businesses, would be work health and safety, anti-discrimination, which usually covers equal opportunity, sexual harassment and bullying. Big things. Bullying's a big thing. People can make a claim against you. Kathryn, you knew that Susie was bullying Fred and you did nothing about it. It's that person's word against mine. But if we have a policy stating 0 tolerance for bullying, this is how you report it, this is what we do about it, you're in a much stronger position. And the final one is code of conduct. How do you want your people to behave? Policies are great tools for disciplining people and also educating them. So, the more policies that you have, the more protection. All right, over to you. So has anybody had any compliance issues or had any situations like that with people? No? Yep.
Just skipping back to the beginning.
Yep.
So we give out casual contracts.
Yep.
And I think the fear is if you give them a part-time or full-time contract, if they don't perform, it's going to be very hard to get rid of them.
Yes.
And I suppose I come from Qantas and I've seen it a million times.
Yes.
People do the wrong things and
yes.
No one wants to touch them.
There's nothing wrong with using casuals. You just need to make sure that you understand what award they work under. You need to understand with casuals the minimum engagements, like, is it 3 hours for a minimum engagement, those sorts of things. Casuals can be a great way to develop your business. You want to make sure there's no casual conversion clauses so you don't get caught with that sort of thing. And then when you've worked with somebody and you decide, no, this person is really good, then you can put them onto a permanent contract. Whether it's part-time or full-time doesn't matter, it's called a permanent contract. So you give your casuals what's called an engagement letter. It's a much smaller document, and then actual permanent staff get a proper contract because there's many more things there. So look, that's a fine way to do it. In terms of getting rid of people, you can't just sack somebody. You've got a couple of avenues. You give a probation period of like 3 months, and you use that. So if you take somebody on, it doesn't apply to a casual so much because casual by definition, job starts when you walk in the door, job ends when you walk out the door. But if they're permanent, you give them a probation period and you really work that So if they're not performing, by 1 month, you're mentoring them at 6 weeks. By 2 months, you're making a decision. You're saying, I'm going to give you another 2 weeks or we're going to have to finish. And then the other thing is if you're a small business under 15 employees, to make those decisions under a year so that they can't bring unfair dismissal cases against you, but they can still bring unlawful dismissal cases against you. So, as I said, sometimes employees, they're very good at knowing what they can and can't do, and you've got a business, you must be filthy rich. It goes with the territory. Over here.
Can I ask a question? We've
Yep.
got a subcontractor, and in his subcontractor's agreement it says he has to pay his own super. Are we still allowed to pay his super as well?
Number one, a subcontractor's agreement will never ever protect you. You can have it there, but if the nature of his work is that of an employee, that will overrule that agreement. Number two, I would double check with your accountant about that, and I would just be careful of it. Just to give you an example, when we recruit bookkeepers, because a lot of people come to us for bookkeepers, and bookkeepers often have their own businesses, and so we'll go through the recruiting process and then we'll interview people and then we'll choose our person, and then the person will say, can I do this as a contractor? I'd rather do this as a contractor than an employee. And what we do now is we say, sure, and we give them a checklist and say, well, if you're a contractor, you'd have all of these. And we give them this checklist, and it says, I need your workers' comp, I need your public liability, I need your professional indemnity, and the vast majority of them will go, oh, I don't have any of those. Oh, I better be an employee. But if you ask me, I'd go, yeah, sure, there's my workers' comp, there's our public liability, there's our professional indemnity. So, true independent contractors hold all of those things, so just check it out.
Because with our one-on-one with Jane, it's just showing me why we need to put on a full-time employee over something like that.
Yeah. You just, the whole thing about dealing with people, you have to be smarter than the people you're dealing with so that you know the laws inside out and back to front. Yeah.
So even so the subcontractor, if I employ a subcontractor and he's one up and he's got a company.
Yep.
All right. So to employ that person, or sorry, not to employ that person, but to contract that person.
You're contracting to the company.
To the company. Now, is it his responsibility does he have? Is it our responsibility to ask for all his health and safety stuff and seize documents and everything else, or is it his responsibility to just say, yes, I have them, and if he hasn't got them, that becomes his responsibility or his liability? Yeah,
look, with a company, you're generally safe as far as contracting because you're contracting to the company and he's just a representative of that company. So you're generally safe. However, depending what industry you're in, and what I would do if it was my business, I'd be looking at the risks. Am I in a highly litigious industry where I'm likely to get into trouble?
So if he's walking on the building site as a representative of ours, in our shirt, with our sign riding on his van, doing the work that we've organised for him to do.
Yeah.
What is he?
Ooh. He has a company, but he looks a lot like an employee.
And he doesn't even book his own jobs in because, he's got a schedule mate, and it's kind of like, 9 o'clock carrying back.
He looks a bit like an employee. Yeah.
And that's what our industry tends to do. Yeah. And you can be a contractor within 3 days. You go
yes.
3 days training and you're out there fitting wardrobes.
Yeah. Construction is a whole, we could run this whole session just on construction alone. So that might be, I can't answer you generally about that, but I would just say he looks a bit like an employee by doing all of those things, so I'd be very careful. And even though the construction industry historically has worked with subbies, the government will still come down on you the same way, so you have to be very careful. Yeah. Anything else about compliance? No? Comments? Thoughts? No? Okay, moving on. So we're going to talk a little bit about recruitment. So this is whether or not you're taking on your first employee or you're looking at new employees or whatnot. Now, the thing is, people say, well, when am I ready to take somebody on? So you have to say to yourself, well, how many hats do you wear at work? And I know, I started 9 to 3, and when I did, the phone rang, I put on my receptionist hat. We got a job, I put on my recruitment hat. We had to do the invoice. I was the accounting person. And what happens is as your business then develops, you start to go, well, maybe I can take that hat off, and maybe I can give that hat to somebody else. That's how you start thinking about it. And then you think, well, where am I most valuable to the business? So I might personally really love to have a day in the office and clean out my files. but I'm not really valuable to the business doing that. You know, my skill is doing this and promoting the business and that sort of thing, because by doing this, obviously, we get business. So I should not waste my time doing menial tasks. Now, if you have a new worker come into your business, you also have to think to yourself, well, what will I do with my time? So if I'm going to get, most people generally start with an admin worker to take some of those more menial tasks off you. So if I'm going to get the admin worker in a day a week, you know, which is something you can do through us or yourself, if I'm going to get that person for a day a week, what am I actually going to do? Oh, I'm going to sit beside them for the day. No, you're not going to sit beside them. You're going to upskill them as quick as you can, and you're going to leave them alone. And if they can't cut the mustard, they're out, because you've got to get out and build your business. So it's about thinking about what are you going to do whilst that person is working for you. So, you know, when you go, you'll know when you're ready to take somebody on. And it is a scary step. There's no doubt about it. You know, people say, I mightn't have enough work. And I've done that loads of times where I've sometimes you just have to shut your eyes and just take that step out, you know. And it's like Kevin Costner, you know, build it and they will come, we hope. So you have to make sure that you understand what that person's going to do. Take that hat off and go, well, what is that person going to do? These are their tasks. I'm going to delegate those duties to them. I'm going to design processes. You know, my team always have this running joke, because I'm constantly saying to them, have you got that written down in a procedure? You need to change that on the server. You need to put it in our procedures book. And they all laugh about that, you know, and it's like, oh, Kathryn and her bloody procedures. But I just had 5 weeks touring America. Never did anything with the business other than authorise the pays. How did it still all work? Because they have procedures. When somebody leaves, how much easier is it to bring somebody in? Because this is the job. There's the book that tells you how you do it. So making sure that you design those processes and thinking about your workflows. So things like, well, you know, when we get that order, what's the first thing that happens? You know, it has to go to production. What happens there? Someone has to do that. What happens then? What triggers the invoice? You know, what triggers this? What triggers that? I'm always saying to my team, you know, when we set up a new thing, well, what's going to be the trigger for you to do that? So it's about designing those workflows, and then, of course, recruiting carefully. So, attracting people to your team. It's hard to get good people, and everybody wants something out of their lives. So you have to develop your EVP, your employee value proposition. Why would I want to work for you? And amazingly, it's not always about money. You know, and often, like in my business, I can't compete with the big guys. You know, we're a small business. We have a serviced office in the city and we have a head office in Sutherland. I've got 6 employees. I can't compete on salary with the big recruitment companies. But I've got people that, heaven forbid, are coming up for long service leave because they stay so long. Why do they do that? Because I can beat the others hand down in lifestyle, in fun at work, in a great working culture, so people want to be there. So it's about thinking, what have you got to offer? Why would someone want to work with you? It's about bringing people on. People all want a career path. They want to learn. So, you know, I'm very conscious all the time of giving them new responsibilities and things to do so that they feel like they're growing and learning all the time. And looking at creative sourcing, you know, there's more to it than Seek. You know, anyone can put an ad on Seek. But, you know, it's about networking. It's about looking at the types of people that you want, what your industry is, and that sort of thing. And then the main thing is to lengthen your recruitment process. You know, we get phone calls, 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Oh, my God, my, you know, receptionist just left. I need someone Monday, 9 o'clock. I mean, in reality, how good a job can we do in that situation? No, it's like the luck of the draw. You know, it's 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. When you're recruiting, you want to have the most touch points with the person that you're taking on. And by touch points, I mean you meet them in an interview, you talk to them on the phone, you see how they write an email, you know, you see them in a formal setting, you see them in an informal setting. The longer you can make that process, the more chance you have of making a successful recruit. You know, because you see someone send an email to you, set them a test, you know. I want you to ring into the office 10 o'clock on Friday. I want you to have done this research and tell me about this. If they don't ring at 10 o'clock on Friday, you know, right, can't keep deadlines, you know. They couldn't research, different things like that. You know, you'll see by emails that they send. You'll look at the way that they write them. You will maybe have your first interview, then you'll say, listen, next week, you know, come, let's just go and have a coffee and have a chat. You know, you'll see them in a more informal situation. And sometimes people just say something and you go, I've just got that feeling about that person. But you can't do that if you don't have a longer time with them. So as much as possible, try to change from being like most small businesses, which is reactive. Susie's left, I need to get someone else. Think like a big business. Be proactive. Go, what happens if Susie leaves? What am I going to do? You know, what's my plan there? What's my staffing plan? If the business builds this way, where will I need more people? Start to think like that rather than reactive. Behavioural interviewing. So when you're asking people questions, you want to ask people questions that elicit more than a yes or no response. So, you know, you don't say, have you ever, you know, done a job where you work with cash? Yes. Have you done graphic design for a sports company before? Yes. You don't want those sorts of answers. You want to say, tell me about a time that you were working with cash and your till didn't balance. Why didn't it balance? What did you do about it? You know, you want to get those sort of responses from people. So when you're asking people questions, ask for examples and say, can you tell me about this? What have you ever done about this? And the reason that we do that is because past behaviours are predictors of future actions. So if, you know, people always do things in the past, they're likely to do those sorts of things in the future again. So also understand the requirements of your role and look at what is it that I want, not just in skills. You know, they need to be good at Excel and they need to be good at Word or whatever, but what about competencies? Do you need someone who can think on their feet really fast? Do you need someone who's verbally really strong and can talk? Do you need somebody who is excellent and fast on the computer, you know, just generally? Do you need somebody who's an uplifting personality in the office because, you know, you've got someone who's really good but they're a bit of a downer and you want to try and balance that? So think about other things that you need in that role rather than just the skills. So we do a lot of professional testing, which you can't do, but we can do. You can certainly do testing when you're interviewing people in terms of, as I said, ring me at 10 o'clock, send me an email, you know, go onto our website, pick a product and send me an email and tell me the key selling points and what you do to sell that product. There's nothing to stop you doing those sorts of things and asking people to do things. The sort of testing that we can do is that we test in skills. So that's all the software testing. We can do personality testing. So we can test people to see if they have certain aspects of their personality, like respect, if they're strong in self-management, if they're conscientious, if they maintain composure. And then we can do competency testing, and competencies are like key aspects of the job. So are they achievement orientated? Do they have customer focus? Are they able to influence? You know, if you're looking for like a salesperson or a business development person, these things are really important. But you never do that and make your decision based on that. Okay, do you remember at the beginning of this section I said to you, you need to increase your recruitment process and you need to have lots of, what did I call them? Very good, touch points, yeah. So what happens is we had an interview, we had a telephone conversation, I got an email from them, I did their references, I've done some testing. You put all of those things together and you build up the picture of your person. So, now I want to know from you. Has anybody recruited? Hands up if you've recruited well and it's worked out really well. Okay, couple. Hands up if you've recruited badly and it hasn't worked out well. Be honest. Be honest. More people. So, okay, so if it didn't work out, what were the key things why it didn't work out?
Lack of communication.
On your part. I'm going to touch on that. That's very good, very insightful. Yeah. So you didn't perhaps tell them what you're after in the job, or?
Well, I thought I did because of my experiences.
Yep.
I didn't really look at the experience of the person. I was talking, or I assumed they had that experience.
Right. Right, okay. I understand.
And that was one, and then I've had a couple. And then another one was rather than testing, like for example, I asked this lady how she was with her computer skills. Yeah, absolutely fabulous. But then when the crunch came, she said, "I'll just ask my son."
Right. Okay, yes. Can't bring him to work, unfortunately. Could I just employ your son instead of you? Yeah, no, very good points, yeah?
I had this lady, this is before I got my ideal employee. I had this lady highly recommended to me by a friend of mine who was doing admin for this lady, this friend of mine. So when she started working for me and I said to her, apparently she had fantastic computer skills. And I said to her, "Oh, can you do me an Excel spreadsheet?" And she goes, "Oh no, don't ask me to do that." And I thought, hang on a second, what have you been doing for this other lady?
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing. So, yeah. Anybody else want to share? Yeah?
I'm not doing reference checks. I completely misjudged the person. She was so enthusiastic, fantastic. I thought,
Yep.
great.
Yep.
And I just didn't follow the rest of the steps, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And do it. Reference checks are really important, and having some really strong questions to ask, like, would you employ this person again? You know, what are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Those sorts of things. Very, very important to do. You know, I always say, like, in my 2 businesses in my life, I would have employed, and because with 9 to 3, we on hire staff, so we employ them. So maybe 30 to 50 a week, and we employ them and then on hire them to you. So lots and lots of people. So over all of those years, and in my previous business, I had staff. How many bad employees have I had? Really bad. And if I think about it, I'd probably say bad. Tried to sue me, 1 out of hundreds. How many stupid employees have I had? Okay, quite a few. But, really bad, because most people are good, and she wasn't even bad. She was good for about 3 years. She left. I didn't sack her. She left and then discovered her research abilities and decided that I had employed her as grade 3 and I should have employed her as grade 5, and she was going to come back. They're always after money. Silly girl. I mean, I work in HR. So I got the call from Industrial Relations, and down they came, and I said, "Come have a look." Open book, and it was all overruled. She didn't get anything. She was very unhappy. But, that's one person out of hundreds. And so I always think, don't be scared by employing people. And I love people. I have a great workplace. And if you're like that and you put in the groundwork, though, I know my rules, though, and I do it properly and I do it fairly, But, still sometimes you make mistakes. If you're recruiting a salesperson, they can do a good sales job on you. They can sell themselves very well. So you have to utilise all of those different touch points, yeah? All right. You're still with me? You're not fading out? Are you fading out a bit? No? Okay, so we're going to go on to our last little section. But before we do, because HR can sometimes be a bit of a dry subject. I acknowledge that. So, well, I think it's interesting, but not everybody does. So sometimes I like to bring a little show and tell, to the presentation, so that in the middle, if everyone's kind of a bit, we'll just have a bit of lighter moment. So I bought you a show and tell today, okay? This is what I bought you. Do we have any Americans in the room? No? Okay. I just thought you might appreciate this. As I told you, I have a great team. I just had a 5-week holiday through the east coast of America. And while I was in Texas, I bought this gorgeous handbag. So, yes, I really love this bag. Thank you very much. And I wanted to bring and show you, because this is the bag that every Texas businesswoman must have. And the reason is because if I feel that you're not paying attention or I'm not happy with you, I could just actually unzip this little pouch here, because it is actually a concealed gun carry. And I could pull out my gun and that would be the end. And I just thought, I have to buy that bag because I've never had a concealed gun carry bag. And I was so impressed by it, I actually even kept the tag, because the tag says, "Be calm and carry a gun." This is a concealed gun carry. Isn't that priceless? I thought I have to bring that as my show and tell. So if you start getting that glazed look on your eye, I'd just be a bit aware. I have a concealed gun carry.
We use it on our employees.
No, you cannot. I often have to correct people when they're talking about sacking people and they say, I'm going to terminate her. And I say, no, you're not going to terminate her, you're going to terminate the employment. So we do not terminate our employees. All right, so now we're going to finish off having a chat about management. And this is a really important section because even if you don't have any workers, this is about managing people. You know, and the underlying thing to having a successful business and a successful team is managing those people. So number one, we learned about compliance and we talked about the things that we have to know as business owners so that we play by the rules so that nobody can have a go at us. Won't stop them having a go at us, they still will, but we can defend ourselves, okay? That's number one. Number two was recruiting, lengthening that process so that we get the right person into our business. And then number three is, well, when we've got the person in that business, how do we make it function? How do we make a great workplace? How do we make them do what we need them to do? So I'm going to give you some hints and tips just for managing people generally. And it works equally well on your clients, on your suppliers, can work on husbands. Teenagers, you know, they're a bit difficult, but you can use some of these little hints and tips anywhere. So firstly, we're going to talk a little bit about human capital management. I lecture for the University of Wollongong and I don't usually use this term when I'm doing small business lectures, but it's a great term because it really hones down what it is that we're trying to do. What is human capital management, okay? You have to look at the people in your business as an asset. They are the same as your bank account, as your equipment, as any asset that you have in your business. So human capital management is an approach where the management of those people, they're perceived as an asset, and we're saying, well, if they're an asset, we should be able to measure their value, their future value, and when all of those people work together, they have to result in economic outcomes for the business. I mean, that's it. I don't employ people because I like them personally. I employ them to drive the business because I want to have more holidays. So, you know, that's the whole reason. Whether, you know, most people go into business usually because we're passionate about what we do. But at the end of the day, if your business isn't making money, invest your money in the bank and go sit on the beach because it's the same. You have to make money and you have to get your staff to make that money for you. So you need to get that mindset that thinks, well, in a nice way, in my mind, I have to be a little bit ruthless because this is what I'm out to do. So I can do that and bring them along with the ride and we're going to have a great time together. And I always say to my team, you know, if we do well, we all do well. It means we have a better Christmas party. You know, we do more fun things because there's more money in the pool. But it's understanding that. That's what we're out to get. Everybody working together to increase economic outcomes for the business. So you've got to get that in your head sort of first of all. So what are some of the ways that you can manage your team? Well, one of the key things is communication, and this is where most people fall down. So by communication, I mean that you have to talk to your people all the time, and you have to listen to them all the time, and you have to blame yourself for their shortcomings all the time. So what happens when Susie does something wrong at work? And I'll give you a perfect example. I had this worker once and I asked for some figures on something, and what I got was a little yellow post-it note on my desk. And I was like, okay. So I went to that person and I said, look, you might have misunderstood me. What I meant by those figures was hopefully an Excel spreadsheet or at least an A4 piece of paper with it, you know, typed up so it's saved on the server. You know, have you ever heard the term report? It's lending towards a report kind of thing. So a little yellow post-it note doesn't really cut it. However, you might have misunderstood me. It might have been my fault. So I'm sorry if you misunderstood, but go back and do it again and I'll try and be clearer in future. So by looking in the mirror and blaming myself first, what I've done is I'm number one made sure that that person really understands. I haven't made them feel bad. You know, I've said, look, it might have been my fault, you know, so they get better at it. Now, if I get a post-it note again, I know I've done my job. then I can go, it's a post-it note, out. Okay, like that. But, it's about looking in the mirror and blaming yourself first. So when something's not happening at work, the best thing that you can do is say to your workers, perhaps you misunderstood me. Perhaps I wasn't clear enough. And even though in your head you might think, oh, that's not true, I know I said that really well, and I know you should have got it, you still do it. It's the best thing that you can ever do. It disarms people straight away. And what does it matter? You're big enough to take your own blame. Blame yourself, okay? And then you have somewhere to go, because as I said, if they don't do it properly, then you can go back to them and say, well, we did have that conversation where I explained it all to you again. So that's one of my key parts about communication, is doing that. Now, another part is about when you have workers, you cannot tell them exactly what to do. You can tell them in so much as saying, oh, look, do you mind emptying the shredder? Something like that. But if you're wanting to do something in your business, like develop a new product or take it in a new way, you have to get the people that work with you to buy into that idea. So you've got those managers that come into the room and say to everyone, right, this is what we're going to do. I've done all this work, I've got this PowerPoint together, we're going to do this, this and this. And you're sitting here going, that's never going to work. And someone is sitting over there going, that's going to take so long, how would I have time to do that? Okay, and people aren't really buying into it because I'm dictating to you what it's got to be. Much smarter way to manage people is come into the room and say, look, I've got this idea. Now, I might already in my head be thinking what it is I want to achieve. So I'm saying something like, look, we want to look at a new income stream and we want to do something like this. Da-da-da-da-da-da. What do you guys think about that? Has anyone got any ideas? And someone will say, well, I don't think that'll work. And that's great, because you want to hear those arguments. I don't think that'll work because of blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, what else could we do? And someone else might say, well, we could do this, blah, blah, blah. And that might be a better idea than you had in the first place. And someone else might say something which is exactly what you were thinking. And then you'll say, Fred, that's brilliant. But you were thinking that anyway. Fred, that's fantastic. That's exactly, I was trying to sort of think of something like that. So what happens is Fred feels fantastic. Fred, that's my idea, and now they're going to do that in the business. So he feels great, and you are slowly, this sounds really horrible, but I call it minute manipulation. You are slowly moving people to the outcome that you're after. But in the meanwhile, sorry?
I was just saying husbands.
Husbands. I'm not sure. Personal relationships can be tricky, can't they? But you're moving them towards that, and you're making people feel great, and you're giving them buy-in to the idea. So everyone leaves the meeting going, we came up with this great idea, and that is so much better and so much more powerful. So another key thing to having a great team is understanding strengths and weaknesses. We are all really good in certain areas and we are all not so good in certain areas. So you need to get to know the people that you work with and where they're really good and where they're not. If somebody is not good at doing something, you can train them till the cows come home, but they're only going to improve so much because it's not a natural talent. Perfect example, I have an employee who just really can't put together really good emails, really strong business type emails. She just can't do it. So for a little while I persevered with it, but she's starting to feel bad because every time I've got to come back to her and say, no, can't you say it more like this, da-da-da-da-da, and so, she's not feeling good about it. And then I thought, why don't I just not get her to do those emails? Because she's not good at that. But she is fantastic on the phone. So I say to her, I was thinking, you are so good. It's all about positivity. Employees, workers, like children, positivity. So you say, you are so good at doing that on the phone that what I'd actually like you to do is more of that. So I want you to do this, this, this and this. And I'm so happy with what you're doing there. But I was thinking about it that, that's going to make your job so much more. Maybe we're going to have to drop something. So I was thinking maybe so that you've got more time, I'd take that off you and give that to so-and-so to do that. And so again, that person feels really good and you're just playing to their strengths. People sometimes play to people's weaknesses, and are always asking for something from somebody. And if it's not a natural talent, you're always going to be disappointed and they'll be disappointed. So it can be hard to do when you've only got one employee. okay? But as your business grows and develops, you think about it. And also even with that one employee, if they really have a weakness in a certain area and you've tried to train them and it's just not happening because they don't have a natural talent there, maybe you need to think, you know what, I'll do that. And what I'll get them to do instead is something else. So it can be it can be a really good way of managing people. So recognise weaknesses, play to strengths. You train people in their weaknesses, definitely, but plan your workflows according to that. So how are employees held accountable for achieving specific business goals? I always talk a lot about, your employees have to drive those economic outcomes. So tell me some ways that you can make your workers be accountable for your business goals. Any ideas? KPIs, key performance indicators. So having things that have two components. They have like a task and then a timeline that has to be done by. Yeah? What else? Sorry?
Policies and procedures.
Policies and procedures, things that they've got to follow, exactly, and disciplinary action if they don't follow them, yep.
Performance reviews.
Very important, performance reviews, talking to your staff. So all of those things make people accountable for their business goals. So their position description. You know, you have some tasks and you sit down with them and you go, well, Susie, it says here you have to answer the phone. You never answer the phone. It's pretty easy. So you have a list of tasks and you talk to people about it. Monitoring and rewarding people. Do you know what the most powerful reward in your workplace is?
Praise.
Praise. Who said that? Gold star. Praise. Absolutely. Praise and thank you. You know, saying thank you to people all the time, praising them, making them feel good. Very, very powerful. Using KPIs. So having those things saying that have an outcome, that you need to do this by this time and the result should be this, something that's measurable. Using HR as a management tool. So, managing your HR and thinking about your different workers and how they work. And as I was saying before, being less reactive and more proactive. Now, this little one that I'm going to tell you is one of the most powerful communication tools. I use it all the time. And this disarms any situation. You know, if you go to, you buy a product and you go back to the shop to return it because it's broken, how do you feel? You know, you usually feel a bit edgy because, you're sort of a bit ready for a fight. You're kind of like, they mightn't take it back and I've got my rights. So, you're sort of feeling a bit edgy and the hairs on the back of your neck are kind of, going up. And the person in the shop, as soon as you go in and you say, look, I bought this last week, and the tone of your voice, they get the same, they start to feel a bit edgy. And so the whole thing starts to escalate, okay? And when you escalate something with anger, you never get good results, okay? You never want to make people feel angry, because when people feel angry, they lash out because they feel angry. So you want to avoid that. So you start with empathy, okay, in any situation. So by starting with empathy and saying that you understand something, so you might say, look, you're going into the shop because you've got a problem, and you might say, look, I understand that this is not actually your fault, and you're selling these products. So straight away you're saying, I'm not blaming you. I understand where you come from, okay? So what happens, it just disarms the situation immediately because you're saying, I understand that. But then you hit the reality. So you say, but the situation is, I bought this teapot last week and the spout fell off. So it's not really very good. That's the situation. And then the action, well, therefore, can you replace this teapot, or I'm not actually happy with the product, I want my money back. But by doing it in that way, it disarms the situation, but it still has the reality in there, so it's still quite strong, and you're giving an action. So if you think about it in terms of staff, right, you've got Susie who always comes to work late all of the time, and you're thinking, I have to have one of those difficult conversations with her. So you call Susie in and you say, Susie, I understand that, you've got 10 kids and your car's broken down and you've got no support and life is really hard. I get that. It must be so hard for you, Susie. I don't know how you do that. I'm just in awe of what you do every day. So what happens? Susie feels great immediately. Her boss is there saying, I'm so in tune with everything you're going through. However, the situation is that we're a coffee shop, And we need to be opened at 8 o'clock to get those people as they walk to the railway station to sell our coffees. And because you turn up at 20 past 8, we're missing all of that business, and I'm going to go broke unless we can fix this. Therefore, and the most important part in the therefore is that word there, we. It's not what I'm going to do, it's what we're going to do. Therefore, we have to work out some way that you can get to work to open the door at 5 to 8. What do you think we can do, Susie? So I'm asking her, you know, and Susie's going to put in her sort of 2 cents worth and say what she thinks, and we're going to discuss it. So she leaves thinking, I understand her situation and how hard it is. But suddenly I've said, yeah, but the reality is this is what we need to do. And then I've said to her, what are we going to do collectively to, you know, to make it work? So you can see how that works so much better than going, Susie, I've had it up to here. You always come in at 20 past 8. It just doesn't work doing that sort of thing. So try not to do that. I work in HR and I know all of these things, but sometimes emotions get in the way. And sometimes, you know, you've got a whole lot on your caseload and you've got all these balls in the air and something happened and you lose it, okay? I've done that. I fired my son when he was about 15. Said, I'll never use you in the office again. And I actually sacked an employee because I was so cranky at her on the spot. You totally should not do it. And then rang her up and had a chat to her and apologised and said, look, you know, it was just the situation, blah, blah, blah. And I always laugh. She still works with me today. And she said, well, what will we do about the past? And I said, I think we should just forget it. And she said, okay. So, you know, sometimes things happen. Nobody's perfect. But you try to remember these rules and you try to work by them. So, all right, what about issues that you guys have had in your businesses with managing people, be they clients, workers, suppliers? What sort of things have you come across? Yeah?
One of my clients, this is a while ago, he was a gentleman that just wanted discounts all the time, and I don't work discounts. My business is not discounted. It is what it is.
Yep.
And I took him to a wholesaler once. We were looking at a piece of furniture, and he actually asked again after I had specified all the situation that he actually. And I was I could feel my blood rushing. I just wanted to, you know, tell him to go away. And I actually sat down on a piece of furniture. So then he had the authority, like he was higher than me, because I thought I don't want to go. Not that he was taller anyway, but I sat down on the piece of furniture and I just said, this is happening far too often. I'm sorry, I just cannot work with you anymore.
Yep.
And in the end, as time went on, I actually decided not to work with him as it was, but I felt...
Did he back down
he did
because
back
you did
down
that?
At
Yeah.
that moment,
Yeah.
he understood, he could see by my facial expression I wasn't joking. Whether I could have managed it better?
You could go, I understand, Fred, how tight it is in your business and you're trying to make every dollar stretch. I totally get that. I'm in small business as well. But the situation is, therefore I can't go any lower. And by you continually asking, you know, it's just making issues and, you know, we may not be able to continue working together, you know, because of that. Yeah. So, but sometimes with people like that, you know, and bullies, they need someone to stand up to them, and then often people will back down. Yeah. But hindsight's a great thing, isn't it? You think about, you know, maybe I could have handled that situation a bit better, but, you know, we're humans. Yeah. Good story. Anybody else? Yep.
Speak from an employee point of view.
Yeah.
Because I've just come out of being an employee. I work for a guy who's very in his head, grey cloud over his head all the time. And basically, I would do a lot of work and I would think, oh, I'll anticipate this, I'll do that. Or, you know, the gratitude was never there.
Yes.
And he was always behind the 8 ball. So you'd come out and you'd go, how will you get this done? And I'd go, well, it was over there 3 weeks ago. You know, I'd prepared it 3 weeks ago, brought it to your attention, I emailed you.
Yep.
And there'd be this confrontation between me and him, and here I was as the worker trying to push him over the line, but he felt that he had to do things in his own time, but the gratitude was never there, and when it came to that point, I'd be like broken, because it'd be like, well, I did everything I could.
Yes.
And there was still no gratitude.
Yes, yeah.
When I left, he was like, oh, you know, why are you leaving?
Mm,
I
mm.
said, well, it gets really hard, and I feel as though I'm doing what I can for you, but you're not sort of...
No.
Really, but I'm just sort of from everyone else's point of view as an employer, it's really important to have that gratitude.
It is so important.
Personally, and you just think,
Yeah.
I'm not doing it in the future.
And it's so important. It's so important. Like, we're all CEOs, you know, if you want to use the American term, which I don't. I use managing director, Australian. So, but my job is to steer the ship. But I don't need to go around and have people going, oh, you know, there's managing director. I'm big enough that I can make myself very humble and just say, listen, guys, you know, when I came back from holidays, the first thing I said to them is, I just want to thank you all so much for what you did for me. Because, you know, when you run a business, you can never get away unless you get away from your phone and your emails. You know, you've just got to, I say, I really need to leave the country, because then I have a complete holiday. Otherwise, that temptation is just so strong always to get back into it. But, you know, actually thanking them and, you know, and coming down to their level and, you know, little things. I always say to my staff, you know, you can take all the authority you want in this business. Like, if you've got a client, to get them over the line and you need to make a decision, you make that decision. I give you the power to take all that authority, but don't worry, I'll tell you if you've ever taken too much. And they never have, you know, but they feel like that, like they're very equal in our business. And I just think that that's such an important thing to do, as opposed to, like, you know, the Devil Wears Prada, you know, movie where, like, oh, here she comes, you know. I have moments I'd like to be like that, but yeah.
But you've got the other handbag now.
I know. I have my gun carrier now, so no one's going to say anything against me.
But I'd like to say to him, this plumber the other day, and he prided himself on how well all his workers got on. And as an effect, he had customers ringing him saying, when your boys come in, it's clear that they just adore each other. There's no feeling of, oh God, you know, when you get people in your house, trainees in your house.
Yes, yes.
And it's tit for tat and they're masculine competition. And it's just like they adore each other, they had fun, it was easy to be around them, they were in my home.
Yeah.
And he goes, and I take that as a personal, like, yay team, because my boys are out there being wonderful together.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So I thought that was really important too.
Your people are, you know, so important to your business because they are the front line. You know, I'm not there answering the phone. You know, if we get a new big client, I'm not there, you know, impressing them and doing that. I have to rely on them to do that. So, you know, they're just so important to the business, you know. Yeah, very, very important. So that's what we're talking about, management issues. So, you know, communicating with people. Is there anything anybody else wants to talk about in terms of management? Yep.
Can I give you a scenario that
Yes.
I have with one of my clients at the moment?
Yes.
Would that be okay?
Is it going to be hard?
Well, maybe.
Okay.
Because I see this, it's a great example actually of what I see in Australia a lot,
Yep.
actually.
Yep.
There's a scenario where a younger brother, it's a family business, a younger brother has been given authority to run a multi-million-dollar business. He's been highly protected by his elder brother because they want the right thing for him. The younger brother has taken that as an opportunity to, how can I say this, be entitled in that space and not
Right.
take responsibility for outcomes and budgets and when things fall over. And now he's being, it's showing on the bottom line.
Right.
And so I'm working with them to change tack with him, and he's kicking and screaming all the way. He's just
Wow,
in child
yeah.
state, doesn't want to step up, just likes the authority and the ability to be able to show off
Yes.
to all his employees. There's a substantial amount of employees. What would you suggest the other two shareholders which one of them's the brother, the other's the cousin,
Yes.
should do.
Yes.
Should do in that environment.
Yeah, you know, family business is so tough because then you've got those interpersonal relationships and siblings and all of that as well. You know, in that sort of situation, I'd probably say you have to bring it back to the economic outcomes, and you have to look back at this is what we did in terms of, you know, and whether it's revenue or whether costs are escalating or what. This is what we did in this period of time prior to him coming on. You know, this is what we do now. And then doing that thing of trying, and it's really hard because you've got those sort of personalities that won't take responsibility, you know. It's like a mental illness. It's everybody else's fault that my life is so bad. So, and it's very difficult to overcome because they don't have any self-awareness. So very hard to do that, but I'd probably try to pull it back to those economic outcomes. You know, when I'm lecturing, I often say, you know, for a HR professional, your best friend is the CFO. Because HR people, we're all great with people and good with all those people skills, but we need to understand the numbers in the business. So because those things, you know, that's how they should work together. We need to know if the business is not making money or whatnot, what can HR do to change that? You know, is that because there's not people in certain areas or those people aren't performing or whatnot? And a lot of HR practitioners look at the nice soft side of HR, but don't really have a very strong business understanding. So, you know, I'd probably, because then that will also take away from the, you know, it's taking away from the personal thing. When you're dealing with people, you know, you never blame somebody for something. You never say, you've done this, you've done this. So it'd be, this is what the business is doing now, you know, this is what we did previously. Why do we think this is happening? You know, that's a hard one though.
Yeah.
Very hard, yeah.
That's cool. And also as well, the other thing I noticed, what would you suggest, what would you say to everyone in the room regarding employing people? Because what I see, there's this beautiful friendly society here, and time and time again within organisations that I'm working with and dealing with, because the business owners are so nice and you're all so lovely, the team, some members of the team, and it's usually the ones that are in critical positions, tend to get that sense of entitlement.
Yes, yeah.
What would you say to the people in the room about how to keep those key metrics in place to avoid those outcomes? Because I'm constantly dealing with businesses who have elegantly created that environment, and to try and undo that,
Yes.
you know, half their businesses sometimes are being wiped out.
Yes, yeah.
That kind of situation. So what would you say to the room on that one?
I often say that the longer I've been in business, the tougher I become, because you have to be very tough in business and you have to have like a very strong backbone. And I remember our previous web developer who I ended up sacking, but we got on very well for many, many years. I was telling him once my mother was sick and she was very sick, and he said to me, well, Kathryn, if she's anything like you, she'll come through because you're as tough as nails. And I thought, I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not. Like, I was not sure about that. But the thing is that you have to be very tough with people. So there's an exterior of yes, I'm accommodating, and, you know, yes, we have a great workplace, but there's that line that do not cross it. And I'll give you a practical example. 3 years ago, I decided we turned 10 years old and we wanted to do something to mark the 10th anniversary, and we wanted to give back into society some way and do something different. So we came up with an event in the Sutherland Shire, and we were going to use the Cancer Council's Australia's Biggest Morning Tea. And we added the word business to it, so we called it Australia's Biggest Business Morning Tea. And we thought, well, you know, if you have a morning tea and you get everyone together and everyone gives a bit of a donation in your workplace, you know, we have 6 workers and we might raise $200. But what if we got all small businesses together? And what if we had a big business speaker, you know, someone from the big end of town, and everybody paid to come and we had raffles and da-da-da? What if we did that? So we ran with that, and then for a while in the office we were calling it, this is a bit rude I guess, but we were calling it Australia's Biggest Cock Up, because we were a bit worried about how it was going, just as a bit of a joke in the office. But it got to the point that it came to my knowledge that some of the staff were kind of saying, I don't think this is working and I don't think it's right and, you know, and I don't think the Cancer Council's going to get enough money and, you know, all this sort of little talking. So we had a meeting, and at that meeting, like, I was really direct with them, and I said, I just want you to know that I have actually run events before and there's no way that this will fail because da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So you're either got to be on board with it or get off board, you know, go. If you're not on board, I can't do it if there are people going, you know, we all have to work together and we have to pull it together and, you know, mark my words, it'll work, you know, and I had to be really quite strong and forceful. And I remember, you know, some of them sort of sitting there going, oh, you know, because they know that they've been, you know, having a bit of a rumour or whatever. But that sends a message, you know, through to them. And there's lots of things that you do in your workplace that send messages like that. You know, just even by having policies and things like that and enforcing those things and picking up things with people. I have an employee who's absolutely fabulous, been with me a very long time, loves her mobile phone, talks on it all the time, texts all the time, and I let that go because she is so exceptional at what she does. But I can't, there's only to a point I can let it go. And I actually just said to her this morning, because she got in and she said, oh, I'm just going to call, you know, the real estate agent. And I said to her, listen, you know, you can't do that in front of the others. Because, you know, I don't mind you doing it, but you cannot do that in front of the young ones because then they think they can all do that as well, you know. So she knows that, yes, I condone it for her, but there is a line, you know, and you have to do that, yeah. It's not easy to do, though.
I think you should tell everyone how your event went.
Well, that was 3 years ago. We started it and we thought we'd get about 50 people and we got 120 came. We did it last May. We had 300 businesses come and we raised $24,000 for the Cancer Council. So, yeah, it was huge. So, yeah, it was amazing. Look, just to finish off, so in your folder that I gave you, my card is in there. It's got my email. So if you wanted to ask me any questions or anything, I'm very approachable. I'm more than happy for you to email me and to work with you. The first sheet is just our cover sheet, which tells you about 9 to 3 and our different divisions. We have 2 recruitment divisions and a HR division and a candidate solutions division. And the final sheet is actually our gift for you today. And this is a no-cost free HR needs analysis. And if you're in the Sutherland Shire, it will be one of my staff members that'll come out. If you're in the city or the north or the west or the east, it'll be me. And basically what we'll do is we'll come out, doesn't cost you anything. If you've got people or you're looking at employing, take you through a 45-minute checklist and check that you're Fair Work compliant. So we'll ask you lots of questions, say, do you have this, do you have this? And you say yes or no. And from that then we'll tell you the things that you should do to become compliant. And then you can use our services if you want, or you don't have to use our services, like it's obligation free. If you're interested in doing that, you can either fill it in and give it to me before I go, or you can just give me your business card and I'll send you an email. But sometimes, you know, people use it because they want to take on their first employee and they just want to know, what should I do? It's all about setting yourself up in the beginning. And I just wanted to share this picture with you, which is one of my favourite photos. That is in, I can't remember if it's the 1920s or the 40s, but it's the Rockefeller Centre in New York when they were building that, and all the people on the crossbeam, you know, work, health and safety, sitting out there, you know, having their lunch. Now, I'd like to say that, you know, these days, taking on people is sort of like having people on that crossbeam, you know. It's still a little bit risky, not as risky as doing that. Like, there's my husband and I on our crossbeam in New York, and I say, well, when you take staff on it, it's kind of like having them on that crossbeam. But it's about how well you get prepared for what you're going to do. And I'll just finish with a little story. We set up the HR for a business over in Chatswood, and they had 0 employees. Came to us first and said, we're going to do this, we're going to expand. And it was an after-school type business where kids went to do things after school. And so we set it all up for them. I went back 6 months later and said, how are you going? We've got 80 employees. So I went from 0 to 80. And I said, any problems? And most of those employees are kids, school kids or uni students, because they're running this after-school activity. And I said, have you got any issues? And they said, well, we have got one issue actually. And we did everything. We did their policies, all their contracts, set up all the systems. They said, we have got one issue. What's happening is we've got all these young kids coming into work and boys meeting girl and they're forming relationships at work and they've never been in a workplace and then they're having a bit of a pash behind the reception desk and we don't know what to do about it. And I'm like, well, if that's your only problem, that's pretty good, you know. And they're like, what do we do? So we had a code of conduct for them. So I said, okay, so we'll look at your code of conduct, and it didn't say anything about personal relationships, but we will add that in, and then we'll use that as a tool to train them. So they trained their supervisors, which were the uni students, to train the kids that if you form a relationship with somebody at work, you don't have public displays of affection behind the reception desk. So they use that as a training thing. But I think that just illustrates that you never know when you start with people what weird things are going to happen. So be prepared because you never know exactly what's going to happen. So look, I hope that was useful for you all and I'm happy to take any questions.